May I now request Mr. Anand Pillai, Education Lead of India and SAARC, Autodesk India Pvt Ltd, to speak on the future of making things.
Yeah. Thank you, John. A very good afternoon to one and all present here today. We had very eminent speakers this morning who's actually talking about or emphasizing around the need of innovation to make in India successful. And my job here is actually to echo the same, but I'm going to bring in perspectives around the future of making things. Everywhere we look today, we see fundamental changes in the way in which things are designed and made. Industries are evolving as new technologies are transforming the way in which people create products. This could be buildings, it could be infrastructure, it could be movies, it could be stories, whatsoever. Technology has disrupted how things are made. And there are many of them who are actually breaking new grounds. And there's an opportunity for every one of you to make a better world by shaping the future of every child that you deal with. For the next about 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about three important things. I'm going to talk about trends that are transforming the transactions and interactions between consumers and producers. I'm going to talk about how technology is radically changing the way in which people are making things. I'm going to talk about how are we on the brink of another monumental era. And I'm going to leave each one of you to think about what you need to do to prepare your child, the child that you are actually attending to in school, to make a better future for him. Let me start by sharing a small story. The video that you're seeing on screen today, now this is actually a video of a building that's actually developed by a company in China. It's a 30-story building with 70,000 square feet of space, built over a span of less than 30 days. The building can actually take an earthquake of 9.0 magnitude Richter scale of earthquake. The last time that they built was the famous hotel, which is Yacht Hotel in Shanghai in China, which is a 15-story building built in a span of 15 days. And the next one they're looking at is a 200-floor building, probably the world's tallest building going forward, an 838 meters tall building. Right? The implications of this is much beyond speed. It's not just about speed here. Construction possibly is the only industry which has never been exported in the past. But things are changing. The company is actually building in products and designs which will help them to build anywhere in the world with construction tolerances of less than minus 0.2 millimeters. And this is just the beginning, my friends. Not way long ago, we had the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building on earth today, which is 828 meters, which is constructed over a span of 5 years. And we're talking about a 30-floor building, which is coming up in less than about 30 days. There is a radical transformation in the way in which people are building things. So what's the nature of disruption? I would rather attribute it back to three fundamental changes or ways in which technology is disrupting this make in India or making things. I would bring it back to production. I would relate it back to demand. When I say demand, consumer behavior. Consumer behavior has changed over decades. And I would relate it back to products themselves. I'm not going to take too much time, but I would like to throw some light on each of this. What do each of these mean? The way in which we're producing things is changing day on day. And there are two fundamental ways in which it is changing. Intellectual production. I'm sure people would have heard this terminology, intellectual production. We're talking about physical production. These are two fundamental ways in which the production environment is changing today. The way in which people are actually working together is changing. Many speakers spoke about this morning. People are sitting at different time zones. People are talking about projects sitting in different parts of the world, different time zones, coming from diverse cultural backgrounds. And they're all working on large-scale networks, big data, bringing in more insights. We're talking about the attitude which is changing around the IP. Attitude towards intellectual property is shifting. I can give you some examples. Open source hardware, Arduino, for example. It helps designers to reuse designs. Quirky, for example, platforms like Quirky and G-Inspiration platforms. These are platforms which is actually encouraging people to share ideas, going a little away from the traditional IP protections. So what does that mean? People have access to shared information, faster innovation is possible. We're talking about computing power, access to cheap computing power. Imagine today, if you have to get 4 CPUs, rented for about an hour, the cost of renting 4 CPUs is less than possibly a meal at the pizza, or probably a meal at Saravana Bhavan. Yes? It's not zero as yet, but it's so close. Access to infinite computing power is going to transform the way in which people are going to design and make things. Access to capital, crowdfunding. People are having access to greater capital today. And what's changing because of that? Because probably the next best ideas, the next best products, the future is going to be from smaller companies. It's going to be from individuals and may not be those multinational companies as such. While all this is happening in the intellectual production, what's changing is also the physical production arena. We spoke about complex production methodologies. I showed you the video of that hotel that's being constructed. One great example of what's happening in those complex production systems. We can relate it back to microfactories, access to supply chains. Easy access to supply chains is changing. Microfactories are able to retool quickly and bring materials to their consumers. So what does that mean? Smaller companies, entrepreneurs get access to supply chains, easier access to raw materials without investing tens of millions of dollars. That makes a big shift in the way in which people are going to make things. And finally, 3D printing. That's the talk of the town. Everyone talks about 3D printing. And I want to show some examples. I represent a company called Autodesk, and we launched our 3D printers last year. We launched an open platform called the SPARC. We launched the 3D printers, Amber. It makes a big difference. This is an example of a heat exchanger designed by one of our customers in the US. It looks pretty simple. What does that mean? The heat exchanger was designed by a computer by just specifying the needs or the requirements. It does not need assemblies. It does not need support structures. There's less wastage and great performance in technology. And this is a single 3D printed part, which is never possible in the past. Good. I would like to relate it back to 3D printing used in the construction industry. This is one company in China which uses 3D printing. They mix concrete, construction waste, and they build houses, pre-designed houses. They build about 10 houses in one day. This is a single 3D printed part of a house. So can you imagine the possibilities of how 3D printing can actually change the way in which products are made today? The world's first 3D printed car. I'm not sure how many of you know this. This is Stratty. This is not on the highways as yet, but you can imagine the possibilities of possibly driving another car which is 3D printed in near future. There is a big shift. We are on the brink of another monumental era. Developers using 3D printing to actually showcase how a city is going to look like. This is an image of San Francisco City, which is developed by a developer in San Francisco, showcasing the actual city, how the city is going to look like in real context. I would like to talk about demand. As I said, consumer behavior is changing. Consumers want to know how products are made. What are they made of? What is the process like? Consumers have started to ask questions, what's there in it for me? Which was not the case so earlier. There's a new consumer class that's actually emerging, especially in developing countries. We had the baby boomers initially, where you had kind of homogeneous requirements. Requirements are the same, low costs, and brand loyalty. People want to stick on to brands. But the impact of this community on the society, on the economy, is waning today. What's changing is the next generation, millennials. And they are different. They want to know what this product is made of. They don't care about the brand. They're looking at how is this customizable, how is it going to be making sense for my need. Fragmentation, for example. The entertainment industry is one industry that's been grappling with fragmentation for quite some time. If I have to take examples of the top 3 mobile app games in the world, just contribute about 12% of the revenue. 88% of the industry revenue come in from the rest of the 195,000 publishers and developers. Take an example, it's across the industry. You can take Amazon, for example. More than 50% of Amazon's revenue in selling books do not come in from the 130,000 titles, the top 130,000 titles. Preferences are unique. Customization is important. People are talking about products made in their own countries, made in Turkey, made in Germany, made in India. Let me put this in context with an example. I'd actually bumped into this company in the US last year. This is a company where they actually use a mobile app. You can take a mobile app, take a picture of your ear, choose a design online and send it to them. They're going to customize the earplug for you and send it back to you. The cost of less than about $40. Things are changing, my friends. It's important for you to prepare your students to address the future. I'll go back to products. Products are metaphor to what your customers are making today. This could be buildings or infrastructures or movies or whatever. People spoke about the Internet of Things this morning. Every product is going to be deeply connected with products, with community of people, with manufacturers. Examples, appliances. We lived in an era where actually you had appliances which independently coexisted. But companies like Samsung, LG, GE, all those world leaders in appliances, they're talking about building products which can connect back with people, with products, and to manufacturers as well. Things are changing big time. The lines between hardware and software is blurring today. Google is getting into hardware. Hardware companies working in software. This cannot independently coexist. It has to be tied. This is changing in every industry. Look at industries like gaming. Look at industries like watching a movie. You are not going to be sitting outside the system to watch a movie or to watch a game. You're going to be rather inside that. And that's going to change the way in which people are going to demand. The products are going to change themselves. I'll go through an example of Tesla. How many of you know Tesla? Great. Tesla believes that the customer is now going to buy cars every year. They know their products are going to last and going to improve, become better day on day, time over time. If you've read the news, Tesla was in the news some time back where they actually had a car flame, and they kind of blamed it back to the batteries. So Tesla actually had a system where the driving was closer to the ground at certain speeds to improve performance. And one of the cars actually hit over the debris, causing a spark of fire. All that they had to do was actually to bring in a software patch which customers can download and the problem is rectified. How is that for a recall of a car? If you had to recall millions of cars back and instead you just bring in a software patch and things are solved. The products are changing. While all this is happening, what's the implication? The implication is simple. A student from one of your colleges here can make better products, can come up with better ideas, and shape the world in a better way than probably one of those MNCs today who are successfully doing it. They have the opportunity. The opportunity is like never before. And I would relate it back to very simply, and this is actually the brink of the monumental era since the Industrial Revolution. And how are you going to manage this? It's not going to be tough. We've managed disruptions in the past as well. How many of you know this? We actually passed through an era of documentation. We moved all our 3D, 2D drawings back into computable models. The company that I work for led the way in it. We then moved to the era of optimization. We spoke about 3D models, visualize 3D models, optimize your designs before the product is built. We have crossed that era. We are today in the era of connection. It is not about connecting or building solutions and applications that can connect 3D models to a community of people. It's not going to be that anymore. It's also relevant in terms of the means of production, the means of consumption, and what's the future of the product itself. There's a small video of a team which I bumped to again last year in the US. This is a team of two friends, Adam and Daniel. They actually wanted to change the way in which robots work. They wanted to design and make different robots. What they did was actually to brainstorm and come up with some designs. They traveled around, they showed it to a few people, a few folks in one of these stages last year. They traveled from Melbourne to San Francisco in the next about 6 months, worked with some hardware incubator programs. After 4 months, they came with another prototype, showed it to their investors. We don't know how they're going to land up. But what it means to me, and should mean to you, is that anyone can make better products. All that you need is access to technology, the environment to innovate. We spoke about that in the morning. If that can be provided by you as academic institutions, trust me, every one of you students will actually be successful in this game. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to be here around during the course of the day. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to address that with you. Thanks again to Shiva, Anbu, and the rest of the folks at ICT Academy for inviting me for this opportunity. Thanks again, and good day to everyone.